All right, let's dive straight into the absolute beautiful chaos of this finale. This episode wraps up the brutal street-level war between Daredevil and Kingpin, but honestly, it leaves us with such a dense, staggering amount of lore to unpack. The episode opens with a deeply nostalgic flashback. We see Matt and Karen heading inside the Panda 2 Garden Indian restaurant. Now, if you've been following their journey, you know this is a spot we first saw way back when they began seeing each other. It's supposed to be full of warmth, right? But the visual storytelling here is doing something entirely different. It heavily contrasts with that warmth. Matt is wearing a striking red shirt, perfectly matching his vigilante persona, and when we snap back to the present day at the trial, we see Karen wearing a subtle pop of red under her suit jacket. This matching red attire is not an accident. It's a brilliant piece of cinematography that perfectly, and I mean perfectly, foreshadows the impending bloodshed and the overarching themes of resistance that absolutely define this entire finale.
Speaking of that present-day trial, Karen's lawyer, Matt, is noticeably late, and we very quickly find out exactly why. He is getting a bullet removed and his leg practically stapled together by none other than Jessica Jones, and they are hiding out inside the former lair of a mass murder. Now, while seeing Jessica back in her element is fantastic, it really highlights a specific absence. I desperately miss Claire Temple in these gritty, back-alley medical emergencies. But let's focus on the real meat of this scene. The deep, bubbling, ideological tension in their methods. Jessica firmly believes the only way New York City will ever truly be free of Wilson Fisk is if he ends up in a body bag. She's pragmatic. But Matt fiercely clings to his Sunday school morals. He tells her, look, I can't do it alone, but I absolutely refuse to cross that lethal line. For Matt, clinging to that moral high ground isn't just a rule. It is his ultimate defense mechanism. It is quite literally the only thing keeping him from totally succumbing to his own inner darkness.
I absolutely have to point out the incredible level of detail hidden in the background of that hideout. You really have to look closely, but if you do, you can spot a child's drawing of a black teddy bear with the legs and the left side of the torso colored in red. I am willing to bet anything that this drawing was done by Jessica Jones's daughter, Danielle Cage. It is such a poignant, heartbreaking image, this tiny symbol of childhood innocence mixed into a very dark, dangerous, blood-soaked world. But on a deeper lore level, for the hardcore comic fans out there, this black and red teddy bear is a brilliant nod to the comic parody character Bearville, introduced in the pages of Secret Wars 2 from 2025. It is these meticulously placed Easter eggs that make breaking down this universe so incredibly rewarding. It shows the filmmakers are speaking directly to us.
Transitioning back into the tension of the mayor's office, we see Buck informing Mayor Fisk that Daniel Blake did not in fact turn in BB Urich. You can instantly read the palpable grief on Buck's face. He had genuinely grown fond of Daniel. Now, let me explain a fascinating behind-the-scenes detail regarding Daniel's ultimate fate. Originally, that scene was supposed to end with Buck actually sparing Daniel, basically telling him to pack up and disappear forever. However, in post-production, the creative team realized Daniel's story just didn't have anywhere else to logically go. So they made a massive digital change right at the finish line, adding a gunshot flare and digital blood to give the character a definitive final ending. Honestly, I believe this was 100% the right move. In a story this grounded, this gritty, it is far better for a character to meet a definitive heroic end, rather than just awkwardly fading away into the background as an unresolved loose end.
But we really need to talk about the crucial turning point inside the courtroom. District Attorney Hochberg starts questioning his colleague, Heather Glenn, specifically regarding Karen Page's mental state. And when Heather stands up there and defines antisocial personality disorder to the jury, we are witnessing absolute chilling psychological hypocrisy. She paints Karen as a total sociopath, defining the condition as a persistent pattern of disregarding the rights of others through impulsivity, aggression, or deceit. But if we take a step back and look closely at Heather's own character arc, she isn't just lying for the sake of the trial. She is entirely projecting her own rapidly deteriorating mental state onto Karen. The severe trauma that Muse inflicted on her has completely fractured her reality. It's actually Heather herself who is transforming into this diagnosis, becoming increasingly impulsive and aggressive as the untreated trauma completely consumes her mind.
The moment Mayor Fisk takes the stand, the sheer amount of lore embedded in his testimony is staggering. Pay attention to when he swears himself in. He deliberately uses his full government name, Wilson Grant Fisk. Now, that middle name wasn't actually revealed until decades after his very first comic appearance back in 1976. We didn't see the name Grant until we looked at a young Fisk's childhood drawings in 2001's Daredevil issue 15. Fascinatingly enough, that exact same comic issue is where Echo shoots Kingpin point blank in the eye, which perfectly explains the chilling cloudy scar we see on his left eye right now.
And then he begins his testimony with that deeply unsettling phrase, "when I was a boy." This is a repetitive, chilling echo of his classic speech to Bullseye. It proves to us that the trauma of his childhood is the eternal engine driving his entire crusade. He is forever frozen as a scared, violent child constantly lashing out at the world around him.
And just when Fisk thinks he controls the room, Matt finally arrives at court wearing that perfectly matching red suit and completely upends the entire proceeding. He drops a massive surprise confession tape from first mate Chris Sava, totally exposing Kingpin's illegal cargo operations down in Red Hook. But he doesn't stop there. He doesn't just drop a piece of evidence and walk away. He stands before the assembled media, looks at the cameras, and sacrifices his single greatest protection, his anonymity. Pulling a total Tony Stark identity reveal, he confidently declares to the world, "I am Daredevil." This single, earth-shattering moment completely shatters the status quo of the city. He finally realizes that as long as he stays hiding in the shadows, Wilson Fisk will always control the public narrative. So he steps into the blinding light, accepting the severe personal cost that's about to come, just to ensure Fisk's web of lies is entirely permanently exposed.
To understand exactly what this massive reveal means for his future, we really have to look at the rich comic history of Matt's identity leaks. This isn't the first time his secret has gotten out. Back in 1986's Daredevil 227, Karen Page tragically traded his identity for a fix, giving it straight to Kingpin. Later on, in 2002, his identity was leaked to the FBI. Eventually, the extreme emotional toll and legal fallout of these leaks led to Matt serving actual prison time, which, as we see, is exactly what is happening at the end of this episode. But here is why I am so incredibly excited about this. In the comic books, while Matt is incarcerated, his buddy Danny Rand, Iron Fist, steps up, puts on the horns, and poses as Daredevil to throw the authorities off the scent. This perfectly, flawlessly sets the stage for Finn Jones to potentially return and protect Hell's Kitchen while Matt is locked behind bars. So, while the trial is abruptly dismissed, leaving Fisk utterly furious but seemingly still in control, this sheer chaos that unfolds just outside the courthouse is a brilliantly orchestrated domino effect. Let me break down exactly what happened. Fisk had set up a desperate false flag operation, a fake Bullseye cosplayer armed with a sniper rifle, meant to assassinate Matt and bolster Fisk's own aggressive anti-vigilante political agenda. But the real Bullseye, who is likely being fed high-level intel by the rogue CIA operative Mr. Charles, intercepts the entire attack. He brutally eliminates Fisk's agents, hijacks the sniper nest, and lines up a brand new target, Wilson Fisk himself. Bullseye takes the shot, but the fiercely loyal Buck Cashman dives in at the last possible second, taking the bullet. This sudden act of sacrifice completely backs Fisk into a corner, forcing the so-called Kingpin into a panicked, humiliating emergency lockdown. As Kingpin locks down the courthouse, I want you to really notice the breathtaking cinematography that follows. As Fisk quarantines himself and his staff inside the courtroom, he symbolically steals the center judge's seat. He is declaring a state of emergency, desperately trying to project power. But BB York counters this beautifully with a massive viral broadcast, bravely unmasking herself to expose Fisk's murders to the entire city. And then, from the perspective of Courthouse Camera 9, we look down at the streets as the citizens of New York rally together. We see this massive red resistance swarm gathering, and from above, they perfectly, seamlessly take the shape of Daredevil's horned mask. It is a striking, unforgettable visual representation of the city finally standing up to tyranny. It shows us that Matt's sacrifice wasn't for nothing. It has inspired a genuine, unstoppable movement. Simultaneously, a deeply poetic and genuinely terrifying tragedy is happening inside that locked courtroom. Mayor Fisk coldly, heartlessly orders his task force to ensure Matt and Karen are dead before they leave the building. Everyone in that room hears this order, including Heather Glenn, and she does absolutely nothing to object. Her mental decline has reached a horrifying, irreversible peak. When Hawkberg simply reaches out and touches her arm, that minor physical contact triggers her deeply embedded trauma. She impulsively, violently jabs him right in the throat. She has fully accepted the murder of the man she once loved because her trauma has made her intensely aggressive toward literally any man she perceives as a threat. The former muse has become the deadly artist, and the dead artist has become her sinister, violent muse.
Now, this incredibly dark turn leads us to a massive, potentially supernatural question. Is Heather acting completely alone out of a pure psychological break, or is there something far more sinister at play here?
If we pull from the recent Unleash Hell Red Band comics, we meet a character named Morgan Whittier, who is directly controlled and manipulated by the deceased Muse all the way from Hell. Considering the much darker, supernatural push we're seeing toward projects involving the Midnight Suns, it wouldn't be surprising in the slightest if it is revealed that the ghost of Muse is literally interfering with Heather's mind from the afterlife, steering her violent actions from beyond the grave.
We absolutely have to talk about the breathtaking hallway fight sequence that breaks out when Kingpin refuses to resign. It is a legendary visual clash of colors. We see Daredevil fighting through a hallway completely drenched in harsh red light, while Kingpin goes on a terrifying, spine-crushing rampage in stark, clinical white lighting. The contrast is phenomenal. During this sheer chaos, Cole North finally realizes the sheer depravity of the man he's been taking orders from and turns on Officer Powell. But even more exciting than that, we see Angela Del Toro's White Tiger step up, fighting alongside Daredevil and Jessica Jones. This isn't just a cool cameo. This is a massive, deliberate setup for a potential Champions project, showcasing the next generation of street-level heroes taking a firm stand against ultimate corruption.
Set to the haunting, beautiful tones of Radiohead's Pyramid song, the climax provides the absolute most powerful image of the entire season. Matt and Fisk, kneeling face to face, positioned as direct, opposing reflections of one another. Daredevil in black and red, Kingpin in pristine white and gold. The poetry of their ending carries immense emotional weight. Think about it. Matt Murdock is sent to a physical prison, but he is spiritually at total peace. He exposed the truth, he saved his city. Wilson Fisk, on the other hand, retains his physical freedom and all his wealth, but he is fundamentally damned. He is trapped in the solitary confinement of his own mind, forced to lose his beloved Vanessa forever. The devil is left in a dark physical hell filled with sinners, while the false angel is allowed to live in a hollow, agonizing paradise.
But this ending doesn't just neatly wrap up Matt's story. It blows the wider street-level universe completely wide open, with the incredibly hyped return of Mike Colter as Luke Cage. This is our first time seeing him since he crowned himself the new sheriff of Harlem, and his presence changes everything. He greets Jessica at Alias Investigations, but what we learn from their conversation is massive. Luke has been doing unsanctioned, off-the-books work with a rogue CIA operative, Mr. Charles. Luke tells Jessica that this dirty work has finally come to an end, but let's be real, when you deal with the deep shadows of the CIA, especially with ruthless figures like Contessa Val pulling the strings, you don't just get to walk away. Val is notorious for incinerating loose ends, and Luke Cage has just made himself a very powerful, very exposed target. Based on recent set leaks and some very direct parallels to the comic books, we can see exactly how Mr. Charles is meticulously positioning Luke Cage for the future. Look at the Devil's Reign Omega comics from 2022, which is the exact storyline this season heavily adapts. In those pages, Luke Cage actually becomes the mayor of New York shortly after Kingpin's massive downfall. Mr. Charles's entire motivation is being a political kingmaker operating safely behind the scenes. With Fisk ousted and the city in turmoil, Mr. Charles is likely going to manipulate the public's anxiety and heavily nudge Luke Cage towards City Hall, setting up an intense mayoral run against Sheila Rivera to rebuild his own corrupt political influence from the ground up. Speaking of the highly elusive Mr. Charles, we see him boarding a flight with none other than Bullseye, heavily implying he has recruited the master assassin for a highly classified Black Ops mission. He is traveling comfortably under the alias Mr. Robertson. But the detail we really need to unpack here is what the flight attendant says to him as he boards. She enthusiastically congratulates him on reaching 1 million miles in the Million Miler Club on Van Lint Airlines. Now, I promise you, this isn't just a throwaway line of dialogue meant to fill the silence. It is a massive, carefully hidden Easter egg that bridges the entire history of the cinematic universe.
Let me explain why this airline Easter egg is so crucial. It connects all the way back to the very beginning of the series. Van Lunt Airlines points directly to Cornelius Van Lunt. For those who might not know, he is an obscure but immensely powerful villain who founded the Zodiac Cartel, a vast criminal syndicate where Van Lunt operated under the alias Taurus. We actually first heard his name dropped way back in Season 1, Episode 10, when Kingpin hosted a fancy fundraiser at the Van Lunt building. The fact that a rogue CIA operative flies exclusively with Van Lunt Airlines carries immense gravity. It strongly suggests that Cornelius Van Lunt and the Zodiac Cartel aren't just rich criminals, they're actively working hand in hand with the CIA and the Shadows.
So, with all that in mind, where exactly are Mr. Charles and Bullseye heading on this ominous flight? If we pause and analyze a tiny detail from earlier in the episode, when Jessica Jones surprises Mr. Charles in his bedroom, we can clearly spot him reading a Pan-National Airlines magazine that is specifically centered around the sights and scenes of Asia. This seemingly small prop choice is a massive clue. It leads us to speculate heavily that they are heading to the continent of Asia, most likely Tokyo, on an off-the-books, black-ops suicide mission completely orchestrated by the intelligence community. If they are indeed going to Tokyo, we can look straight at Daredevil issue 111 from 2008 to understand exactly why this is so monumental. In that specific comic run, Bullseye goes on a brutal mission to Tokyo to eliminate high-ranking members of the Yakuza. During this hit, a young Japanese girl who's been trafficked watches him take out her captors. Completely inspired by his terrifying, flawless lethality, she dedicates her entire life to becoming just like him, eventually transforming into the deadly assassin known as Lady Bullseye. Sending Bullseye to Tokyo right now perfectly sets the stage for him to rescue and train this young captive, acting as a very dark, twisted, lethal mirror to Clint Barton and Kate Bishop's dynamic.
Finally, as we wrap up this breakdown, let's look at Bibi Urich, sitting quietly at her late uncle's desk at the New York Bulletin. Surrounding her on the walls are old, framed headlines covering the Avengers Battle of New York with Loki and the Hulk's massive clash with the Abomination in Harlem. It is a quiet, deeply powerful moment that perfectly encapsulates the thematic core of this entire season. By exposing Fisk to the light, Bibi ensures that the truth survives, no matter the cost. This finale beautifully champions a narrative of unyielding resistance against authoritarian tactics, leaving us reflecting on the profound power of ordinary people standing up. So, what choices will these characters make now that the board has been entirely reset? And more importantly, who will survive the incoming fallout? That is the question that's going to keep us eagerly awaiting the next chapter.